The story of the Apollo program is one of the most significant in American history and is often referred to as the greatest feat of human ingenuity and engineering, alongside accomplishments the magnitude of the Manhattan Project or the Panama Canal. Its effect on social sciences in America can be viewed as profound through a multitude of perspectives, especially in terms of economic and technological impacts. In this film, you'll discover why we believe that the Apollo program was the greatest achievement in human history.
Entered the Soviet Union circa 1957. Tensions with the United States had been rising for nearly a decade after growing distrust following the end of World War II. This period, known as the Cold War, was full of hostility, despite the lack of any physical altercations. So when the Soviets successfully launched the first satellite in the history of mankind, Sputnik, the hostilities found a new body into which they were funneled: the space race. This was one of the biggest components of the Cold War and was a period of intense technological competition between the two countries.
At home, the launch of Sputnik hit hard. Having enemy satellites in the sky made the possibility of being attacked with futuristic new technology a fear that sank deeply into the minds of the American public. With a satellite overhead, what could come next? Missiles being guided to fly farther than ever before? Laser attacks from space? If a satellite was possible, who knew what else the Soviets were capable of? Because of this, the United States went through a phase of unparalleled overdrive in technological innovation. For the future of the United States, there was no option but to win the space race.
Some of the first steps taken to compete with the Soviet Union were the creation of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, coupled with a mass redistribution of funding to benefit areas of technological development. The United States' massive military-industrial complex eased the implementation of these changes, and with that, the space race was set into full motion. Soon enough, the United States had prepared its first instance of retaliation. With the assistance of German scientist Wernher von Braun, the United States was able to launch Explorer 1, the first American satellite, less than 1 year after the launch of Sputnik, though its delay made it much less impactful in the international community.
Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had a string of multiple subsequent successes. In late 1957, they sent a dog named Laika into space for 5 hours. In 1959, they had the first probe to hit the moon, named Luna 2. Then in 1962, they sent a human to space for the first time in history when Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth in the Vostok 1. By that time, the United States had tested a similar ship with chimpanzees, but the Soviets were a step ahead of them at every corner. It seemed like we were falling behind in the great race. That is, until one brief moment that changed everything.
May 1961. John F. Kennedy is just a few short months into his presidency, a fresh figure in the eyes of the American populace. But despite his short time in the limelight, he had an integral role in the space race. He would give a landmark speech at Rice University in Houston, Texas, that would mark the biggest turning point in the space race.
And overcome with answerable courage. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Kennedy's speech served as a catalyst to maximize the United States' efficiency at a focused space race machine. With a specific goal for the country to work towards, things started to turn in the favor of the U.S. as the innovation and productivity was channeled together. By the end of that year, in fact, Project Apollo, NASA's lunar landing program, was established, with remarkable swiftness for such a daunting goal.
Over the next 3 years, funding for NASA increased to nearly 500 times what it had been only years prior, to a staggering $5 billion annually, $43 billion in today's currency. Throughout the 60s, the government contracted over 20,000 companies who employed a total of over 400,000 engineers and scientists. Each company was responsible for a specific part of the project. Northrop Grumman engineered the lunar lander, Rocketdyne built the engines for the Saturn V rocket, and countless other companies produced the thousands of subassemblies necessary for the mission. Boeing was tasked with the highly difficult mission of tying all these parts together, a process known as integration. Jack Hackala was one of the 771 Boeing engineers who was flown down to Houston from the greater Seattle area to assist with the integration.
I joined Boeing right out of University of Minnesota with an aeronautical engineering degree in 1961. And then the following several years I worked in the space program and on various space unmanned spacecraft like the Voyager and the Viking, and then we worked on the lunar orbiter program, which was intended to take pictures of the moon in order to select landing sites for Apollo. And after lunar orbiter, then I went over to the space labs to help them build a solar simulator for future spacecraft. But in the meantime, about 1968, NASA awarded the Boeing company the technical integration and evaluation contract to check on the Apollo program various contractors. Boeing itself was the prime contractor for Saturn V booster, the first stage, and impressed NASA with its capability to do systems engineering and integration. And hence, NASA decided to give the contract to Boeing to do the number of systems engineering tasks.
During the 1960s, as both the U.S. and USSR pushed billions into their space programs, the research and development that went on during the period directly stimulated the creation of over 6,300 inventions, leading to a number of important innovations. One of these was the creation of the integrated circuit, which was designed to assist the lunar module's navigation system. This technology led to the development of the microchip, which revolutionized the way computer processing was done and led to the creation of modern computers. Other technologies developed during this time period include flame-resistant clothing, memory foam, wireless headsets, cordless tools, and fluid recycling machines, which paved the road for the development of kidney dialysis machines. So many technological advancements were made, in fact, that it is estimated that the technology was advanced 10 to 20 years further than what it would have had been if the Apollo program had not been established.
As the decade came nearer to a close, however, it seemed as though the project may not succeed, as both the United States and the Soviet Union experienced setbacks. In 1966, the Soviet space program's chief engineer, Sergei Korolev, died, and in 1967, 3 of America's most accomplished astronauts, Gus Grissom, Roger B. Chaffee, and Edward Higgins White, were killed when the command module of Apollo 1 caught fire during a test.
Despite these setbacks, the United States pushed on and continued to advance through the challenges laid out by the very premise of the Apollo program. In 1968, Apollo 7 lifted off the ground and successfully ran several tests in space. And later that year, Apollo 8 achieved lunar orbit. The US was getting closer to their goal, but so were the Soviets. Multiple successes with test missions of their Soyuz spacecrafts and the LK lander allowed them to reach testing of their full man-to-the-moon setup. They were farther down the track to landing on the moon than the US, and fears that they would beat us to it and void our many efforts began to spread. But after 4 consecutive failed attempts at launching their N-1 rocket, their key to getting to the moon, it became apparent that they were going to have to start from scratch. They decided that they should make the transition to unmanned craft, and in 1968 landed 2 lunar rovers, the Lunkhood 1 and 2, on the surface of the moon. A third craft was built, but due to a lack of funding and launch rockets, it was canceled.
At this point, it became clear that only the US could get a man to the moon, so when the scheduled launch time arrived, nothing could break any spectators' concentration on the upcoming Apollo 11 mission. On the 20th of July in 1969, the whole nation, and much of the world, were fixated on their televisions, eagerly awaiting the moment that the United States would attempt the impossible. And then, finally, the time came to change history, and not a single witness's hopes were let down.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from radio. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States.
The Apollo 11 moon landing was a resounding success. It of course accomplished its mission just as planned, but also had an impact that reached far greater than what we could have ever expected. The hard work and great payoff instilled a great sense of
Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over. Coverage of the scene.
With Cold War fears. The Soviets, who had invested a massive amount of their resources in the space program, were bankrupted from their efforts to put men on the moon, from which they never recovered. The founder of a key company in the satellite industry cited the Apollo program as a direct influence for starting his business. Images of the Earth brought back from space in the missions inspired a new peace activism movement that led to the creation of Earth Day. Its impact on education was also significant, with a number of PhDs pursued in universities tripling during the space program's existence.
These are all major effects, but the biggest influence the Apollo program had was probably on the field of space exploration itself, as it led to the Space Shuttle program and the modern generation of space exploration. To date, NASA has plans in the vein of the Apollo program, as it intends to send humans to Mars by 2030. The Apollo program has a far-reaching legacy, and who knows how far it will take us in the future.